So, kicking things off, let's talk about the Many Saints of Newark, right? This is a crime film, actually. This is based off of the highly popular and highly influential series The Sopranos. This is one of my top five favorite shows of all time, and just to kick things off, I wasn't on that Sopranos train when the series was big, back in 1999, and it just went on for about I believe it, yeah, 6 seasons actually, I believe it was, right. But I got into it sort of fairly late, right? Similar to The Wire, right? Which right now at the time of me recording here is number one in terms of my all-time favorite TV shows, right? So for me, I kind of, I was still curious about it. It's just that I just wasn't, like I wasn't, like I used to watch HBO mainly for, movies, right? But I didn't really used to go for the TV shows, right? But it's just only after the fact when people just start praising shows like The Wire and The Sopranos, for example. That's when I jumped on board, right? So literally right after the show ended, that's when I was like, okay, that's when I'm going to jump into, right? And I'll never forget though the series finale and how it just shook people
Right.
in a not so positive way, because people were just like, what the fuck just happened? Like
Right.
literally
I
it
remember
just kind of stops abruptly.
yeah,
Um,
I remember BoJack Horseman make the best joke about that.
oh, I think I remember that. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it's a good thing that you bring up BoJack Horseman too, because I'm gonna mention him in a little bit, right?
Okay.
But yeah, for me, actually seeing the episode out, just seeing that finale and the context of it, I think is brilliant. And it just really goes to show just how forward-thinking The Sopranos was. Because for me, right, like at first glance, just kind of watch like, oh, it's just like a Goodfellas ripoff, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
just the
That's
typical, hey, you know
that
what I
no
mean? Forget
that
about
is
it, all that kind of stuff. But it's
yeah that
way deeper than that. But yeah,
no that is the main reason I never really got into it myself. It does felt like, well, Goodfellas is a series. Like, Goodfellas is a great movie. Why if they stretch that out and stretch out every possible scenario that you can play out? And I never got into that. That's the main reason I never got into The Sopranos.
yeah,
'Cause I
yeah. And
felt
I actually have a feeling that this is the reason why a lot of people haven't really gotten into it. Mainly
right.
because, it feels like a Goodfellas ripoff,
Well,
or just
that
mafia
and it
stuff,
felt
I mean, blah blah blah.
and again, because it came so much time after Goodfellas, like what, when Goodfellas came on, 91. When Goodfellas came,
1990, actually. Yeah.
90, right, so about 10 years after. So to me, like, from an image standpoint, it felt kind of regressive. It's like, where we still doing mob stuff and equating it to Italians, like that stereotype still kind of hanging around. Like, you think you're gonna do more with it, and that's why I can get it. So I only learn about Sopranos kind of really through the ephemera and humor. um I don't know if you remember Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. That's a great
Yes, yes,
parody of The
I do.
Sopranos. Great parody of Sopranos, and that thing with Fred Flintstone, which is hilarious. Yeah, that's the only way I kind of got into it myself.
I actually forgot that. Though. I need to
It's
look
one
it
of the
up. I
best
need to look it up.
episodes.
Yeah.
It's one of the best episodes because they do a parody of the opening with Fred going home from work, but the same, cutting montage stuff, but it's him driving. It's the funniest thing ever, driving through Bedrock,
Yeah.
but the same New Jersey kind of thing. It's really, really well done.
Right, and for y'all that don't know, that is a reference to the intro to The Sopranos, which
Yeah,
is
right,
one of
yeah.
the most iconic opening sequences,
Right.
I would say, in TV. Period. Yeah, so like right after I saw the finale, what I mean, and how people were freaked out by it, or like wondering if literally people thought that the subscriptions to HBO had just got off, so they were literally calling HBO on that Sunday night to ask, wait, now, the show just kind of cuts off just like that. And swear to God, like after like about 10 or 15 seconds of black, you see executive producer, what's his face, right? And people are like, what? You know what I mean? But in the context of what it is, though, I loved it, right? And in a nutshell, without spoiling anything, it's just merely showing that, Tony Soprano got murked. He got killed. But, it's just that they didn't want to show it. Behind the scenes reason being is because the song that they use, I think is Journey's Don't Stop Believing. Journey, the
Right,
band
right.
himself, didn't want their song to be used in a scene of violence. So it's just like, we're just going to end it like that, right? I know some people kind of felt like, oh, you cheat the audience. I mean, you had people on board for like 6-7 seasons. This is how you're going to end it? It's like, no, you know what I mean? 'Cause the creator of the show, David Chase, who, by the way, writes the script for this, He was like, no, I know my audience. I'm not gonna cheat them with this finale, but and this is one thing I really love about the show is that it always finds ways to be sort of unconventional and real cutting edge, right? Because it's easy to look at a show like this and be like, hey, it's a it's Goodfellas 2.0, whatever it is. But it's like, way it is. But at the same time, I'm really trying to push the boundaries of what television is, right? You know what I mean? And this is one thing I love about the show. So just to touch on the character quickly, the main character, Tony Soprano, played by the late great Michael Gandolfini.
Yeah.
Sorry, James Gandolfini. Oops.
Right,
his son Michael actually shows up in this, right? Yeah,
right.
He plays a younger version of him, right? Yeah, Tony, right? Remains one of my all-time favorite TV characters, and I would actually put him up there with the Walter White from Breaking Bad or the BoJack Horseman, right? In the sense that, and why I bring up all three is that it's basically these characters that you empathize with, but they are unlikable. Not entirely unlikable, but mostly unlikable. They do really bad things, and it's to the point that even these shows will always show you, what I mean? It's not like they will let that slide. They will show you literally why you should hate this person, right? And it's no different with Tony Soprano. I mean, for one thing, he has it made. You know what I mean? He's rich. He has a family, son, daughter, lovely wife and whatnot. But they all know that he works for the mafia, right? But it's under the guise of this sanitation, business, right? But it's all these things that he's doing. You know what I mean? He has a mistress. He sleeps with women on the side. He's doing all these blue-collar crime stuff, basically, right? And yet still, he wonders why his children are so rebellious. He's wondering why his wife would, dig her horrors, as soon as she finds out that, she was being cheated on and those things like that. And they really emphasize a lot on the family aspect as well, too. So not just his family, but his mafia family, so to speak, right? And that's really what Dog About to do, is that it kind of just shows these archetypes as real people, right? So they make these logical decisions and whatnot, and they always have you guessing as to what they're going to do and why, right? But of course, every so often, they're going to do something really grimy and fucked up, but at the same time, it's like, it's kind of the nature of the will itself, right? But they show wisely, and I'll stop here before I get to the actual movie itself. It will tell you that, there are consequences, right? It's not glorifying crime at all, you know what I mean? So similar to like the great films, like the Godfathers or the Goodfellas, the Casino, stuff like that.
Right.
There's consequences to this shit, right? And, even the worst part about it too is, even if you get away with it, you kind of have to live with that shit there. And that eats you inside, like literally, right? And that's really what I love about the show. It shows you that without really, preaching to you or beating you over the head with it, right? So this movie here, The Many Saints of New York, is basically a prequel to that series, right? And in an odd way, right? And this is one thing that's gonna throw people off, right? But you will go into this thinking, oh, we're gonna see, the rise of Tony Soprano. We're gonna see how he becomes who he is, right? But actually, no. It's more about the product of my environment scenario. It's all about like the elements that kind of made him that made him who he is, basically, right? And it kind of centers on a particular character that would be Dicky Moltisanti, who's played by Alessandro Nivola, right? And if you remember if you're familiar with the surname Moltisanti, he is the father, is the father of Christopher Moltisanti, right? Who is played by Michael Imperioli, right? That was like one of the first time I ever saw this guy act, and he was always one of my favorite characters in the show, right?
Right.
And how it was is that Chris was basically, under the wing of Tony. So Tony was just kind of showing him the ropes, right? But, Christopher being who he is, he kind of wanted to branch out and do his own thing, you know what I mean? There was a point in time in the series where he wanted to get into acting and stuff like that, right? And it was all that kind of stuff, right? But they kind of let you all know, and, sorry for those who haven't watched the series, is that he was killed basically by Tony, right? Not gonna say where or when it happens, but it happens. He got killed. It's often this kind of weird circumstance, like something real circumstantial. That's all I'll say, right? So what they do here is that he's now, older Chris now is narrating the story, right? But it's really about his father, Dickie, and basically you're seeing his rise to power as well, because he basically works alongside Johnny Soprano. That would be Tony's father, right? who happens to be played by we boy, John Berntal boy. So
Right.
Shane Ming is in this movie as well.
Right. Nice
good. Alright. I will lie though, like John played good. He played the Soprano character really well, right? And along the way, they do establish at the time that Chris wasn't born as yet. This is in the late 60s, and one thing they do very well now is that they touch on the racial tensions that were going on at the time there. It wasn't just, about, blacks and Italians, but, blacks and whites, right? And there's a particular moment that starts off this riot, actually, what they call the Newark riots. I believe this was a real event that took place, right? But I'm not sure if in the movie, if this was the event that led to it. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'm not sure if that was what spurred it on, right? But it could be, right?
Right.
So while all this is going on, we introduced to a new character played by the name of Harold, right? Who is played by my boy, Leslie Odom Jr., right? He's in this too.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And he basically is he will become the eventual rival to the Soprano family and the Multisanti family, etc. Because he starts off as this, this guy who kind of helps run numbers for Dickie. So he's cool with him and all that. But, at the same time, Harold's, he is his first rodeo, so to speak. So he knows, how...
He's side-eyeing.
Yeah, and when with the other members of the family, you kind of watch him, what are you doing with this Moulian and all that kind of stuff. I was just I know this shit too, but fuck all, I gotta do my thing, right? And there's a great moment in a restaurant where he literally shits them up in front of their mistresses, you know what I mean? I love that, right? But yeah, he has his little agenda on the side too, because he eventually becomes sort of offended by Dickie and what he's doing as well. And to the extent Johnny, right? Because Johnny gets arrested at a point in time. He comes back. He's released in the early 70s. I believe it's 71 or whatever. So there's a little rift going on between Harold and the Soprano family. So he starts off and does his own thing, right? He actually hooks up with Frank Lucas himself,
right.
Yeah,
right.
Frank Lucas, right?
Because Frank Lucas, right? That's the Vietnam War, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and they touch on all that too with the Vietnam War and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, basically he's trying to rise among the ranks as well too, as one of the big crime guys basically in Newark as well, right? And it starts this war with him and Dickie, right? But while all this is going on now, we see Tony as well too. We see a young Tony. Starts off as a kid in the 60s, and then we see him as a teenager, played by Michael Gandolfini, right? And you see his relationship with his mother, who was a major character in the first few seasons of the show, played by Miguel Vera Farmiga, quite excellent in my opinion.
Right.
And basically it's him just being this juvenile delinquent. He's just doing all this dumb shit basically with his friends, right?
Yeah.
But it gets to a certain point where you realize that he looks up to Dickie even way more than his dad. He really sees Dickie as this role model. He wants to be him, right? And it gets to a point where, Dickie tries to take him on his wing too. But he's warned by his uncle, who is played by Ray Liotta. And it's funny that I bring up Ray Liotta too, because he actually plays two roles, right? He plays both his uncle and father, right? Dickie's uncle and father, right? Okay. It's weird, but they do that, right? But really, what the show is just about, just before jumping to review it, it's about Dickie. We're seeing just how he moves about in this world here, where we see some younger versions of popular characters like Silvio and Paulie. They actually show up as well too. But at the heart of it, though, it's about Tony. It's about him just kind of just being part of all of this going on, right? And even though it does not affect him, literally in the face, you could still kind of understand, these are the things. This is literally the seeds being planted, and this is what will lead to Tony being who he is, right? And that's where I'll stop, right? So, what I will just say right off the bat is that fans of the show will appreciate it. They will appreciate the callbacks to characters and settings and conversations being brought up, things like that. They will appreciate those things, right? They will, at least appreciate seeing Dickie Moltisanti for the first time, because, he was always mentioned in the series, but they never saw him, right? Because, it's kind of obvious why. I don't have to see why he wasn't in this show, why he wasn't in the series, right? So it's cool seeing, this is Chris's dad, and this is why Chris was like that, you know what I mean? That, and this is why Tony, to an extent, is like that, right? And it's a really bold call to just let people know, yeah, this movie is not gonna be about Tony and oh, this is how he becomes the Tony that we know. Because I think like when you really think about it, it probably would be too easy to pull something off like that. Like, oh,
Right.
yeah, you know what I mean? If we're doing a prequel, it must be about the main character and seeing him as young, right? I mean, this is like a tried and true thing. We've seen this hundreds of times before, right? So
Right.
to have it centered on the person who Tony pretty much idolized is a really like bold call, right? And I have to
Yeah,
applaud,
right.
the people behind the scene for making that call, right? It's also, I forgot to mention, directed by Alan Taylor. I mean, he is, just synonymous with a lot of great HBO movie shows, right? He did 6 Feet Under, Sex and the City, Sopranos, Game of Thrones, Boardwalk Empire, you know what I mean, Deadwood, stuff like that, right? And I thought, like, directing wise, this was excellent. Like, this was just superbly filmed, right? And the cinematography was gorgeous as well too. It has a way of using like soft light now. Like, they use a lot of soft light in the show.
Right.
So it gives it this sort of like weird sort of atmospheric vibe to it. Even though what you're seeing here, you know what I mean, as far as just this world is just really grim and dark, you know what I mean? But I will admit, though, like, because as a fan, right, the question really, and for me going into this, is like, is there really a reason for a movie like this to exist?
Right.
Do we really need to know the origins of, Dickie Moltisanti? And I would say it depends on the viewer, like, it depends on the fan, right? If you just love Tony and you just want to see it all about Tony, then you're going to be very disappointed here.
Okay.
Tony, technically, in this movie is not even a central character. He's more of a secondary character, right? But given the choice of making Dickie be the lead, it makes sense why. Because I mean, the guy is fairly a kid. You understand why, right? Even though in the back of your mind, like for me personally, I kind of wish that it was about, like, I wish that he was more to the forefront. So at least you kind of understand how these events are affecting him. You're just more seeing Dickie's life and how the things that he gets into affects him, right? But in no way do these things affect Tony, unfortunately, right? So it just kind of comes off as, well, you just kind of know half the picture, you know what I mean? But because you're in this world where basically your friends and relatives, or friends and relatives of your parents are in the mafia or in the mob, it's like, well, eventually they're gonna jump into that too, you know what I mean? It kind of comes off like that now.
Right.
But still, I wish that the show gave us a little bit more reasons as to how Tony became who he is. Not seeing
Right.
go full cliche and, oh, he was a stick-up kid and blah, blah, blah. No, they just kind of show us logically how he became that in this period, right? But the story that they tell here is really, really good, I must say. And, it really does take you back into the world of the Sopranos. So I'll give them that, right? One thing, though, that I noticed is that the show itself, and I made this joke on Facebook, it really does feel like a 2-hour episode of the show. Because the way how it's structured, the way how it's told, the dialogue, everything feels legit like an episode where, events just kind of happen and they're not really like strung together by some kind of big conceit or whatever like that.
Right.
Like that. It's just sort of like a slice of life thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of seeing events play out. Eventually, something that happens before is going to have some kind of payoff afterwards, or maybe it doesn't, right? And I would say, as far as the payoffs, though, some of them have do pay off. Well, some decisions, I would say, do pay off, and others don't really happen, right? And I would attribute that to the style of how the story is told. It's almost like if you just kind of jump into the series premiere of the show, and you're just seeing characters being introduced, like, okay, you're seeing that happen. Oh, something happened to him, but hopefully in the next episode we'll see what happens here. But you don't
Right.
really see that in this movie, unfortunately. Case in point, the character of Frank Lucas. Didn't
Right.
know he was going to be in it, right? But it'd be interesting seeing where he
Well,
would
because
lie in this
I
show.
think,
It's just
yeah,
like,
I didn't
well,
expect. Yeah,
it
I
was
didn't
just an
expect.
appearance, so...
Yeah, I didn't expect anything from him because like he's a real person, so like that would be kind of weird. If you understand.
True. Like, not seeing they should shoot and get arrested or whatnot, like what happens in the end of American Gangster, the movie, but still kind of just show, okay, well, they're bringing him in, but he's in as a cameo. But I understand, given the nature of the storytelling, why it's like that, right? And this is the way how it was with the series in general. Like, I'll never forget there was an episode with Bokeem Woodbine. He actually made an appearance, right? And I actually thought that they were going to make a reference to him, but actually they don't. But maybe there's a reference to him. But you can remember, I haven't seen the show in ages, so maybe there's a reason, right? And why I'm bringing his character up, Bakim's character, is one thing I really do appreciate about the show here is that of the inclusion of more black characters, because
Right.
for better or for worse, we can make the argument with the show itself, the series, that not that much black people, right? And then of course the way how black people are talked about, especially in mob films. There's always like disdain towards black people, right? But
Exactly.
in this show here, given the
it always had a kind
racial
of
tension.
Exactly. That's a big thing. A lot of Italian mobsters are pretty racist. Like not a And that's secret. We saw that. That's what I was saying with it is that with Goodfellas, I wanted to see how that argument would evolve. And I never got that from the show, like the show itself. And I don't know how many people would argue against the show or for it in that sense, but I never got that in my opinion. That's how I feel about it. That I want to get into the show, to be honest.
Right, and for me it was it was never like this is why I don't watch Friends, because Friends don't have black people.
Right.
It's not that type of argument though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I can kind of understand people watching the show itself, the series, and being, come on, I know black people in the show. Why come?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So ever so often you might see one or two show up, right? But again, I don't, it's the story being told, right? So I can't knock, David Chase and be like, you should have more black people in the show. It's like whatever, right? This is the story being told, right? But anyway, so I do appreciate the fact that there are more black characters in this particular film here. Leslie Odom Jr., I thought that he was great as the character. Harold, actually everybody performance wise came through really solid. Even the guys who played younger versions of favorite characters. You may argue like, like we don't really need them in the show. They're just tertiary characters. They're just fan service. But again, this is the story that you're telling, right? Fine, right? But I would say in terms of the flip side to it now is that if you're going into this movie completely blind now, you may come out of this pretty disappointed. And I would say, this will be the same thing for some diehard fans too, because the way how the show is marketed, unfortunately, is like, well, who made Tony Soprano? So you're thinking, okay, well, it's about the guy who made him, so to speak, and Tony himself. But it's more like the guy himself, and Tony just there kind of shows up ever so often to get guidance, but he's being pushed away for reasons, right? That's all it is, right? So yeah, that would disappoint people. But so that's just to wrap things up. So in a way, really how I see it is just like an episode of the show, right? But it leaves a lot open, and this is like when you think about it, it always feels as if this is like the series premiere of the series, right? But then when you go into the series, the actual series, that's when you'll see everything else play out. The problem with that now is that the series takes place in the late 90s, and this is like late 60s, early 70s, right? So it's kind of like this long, this huge gap of time now. So I don't know if the plan is that they're going to make more movies out of this, and we'll see the story play out even more. I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. Personally, I think this should just be like a one-off thing, just similar to El Camino, right? Because the good thing about El Camino was that it was just saying, hey, after Jesse drove off at the end of Breaking Bad, what happened to Jesse? And that answers the question. So, for me, I felt that, there was a huge opportunity that was missed in terms of like really showing us how Tony became the way he was, right? Not saying it has to be explicitly about him, right? But you could have incorporated him a lot more into the story and still kept the whole Dicky Moltisanti story, active, right? Because it is quite fascinating, right?
Right.
But it almost feels like it's cheating both the fans and non-fans by just letting them know, yeah, Tony's in it, but not that much, So, yeah, sorry. I imagine it's going to be even worse for people going in blind because, yeah, I imagine people are going to go into this and be like, all right, this better make me not want to watch the series itself. And I have a feeling when they come out of it, they'll be like, well, maybe I will, but maybe I won't, right? So that's the downside to it, right? But for me personally, I do appreciate the effort that was put into it in terms of taking us back into this world. It really does feel like you're watching The Sopranos all over again, though, but just in movie form, so to speak, right?
Right.
But again, I just felt there was a missed opportunity in terms of the character that everybody knows and remembers from the series, even though we haven't seen it. Everybody knows about Tony Soprano. Everybody heard about it before. But this was an opportunity where you could have, showed us more about him, right? But it was just mostly sporadic and just in the background compared to all this Dicky Moltisanti stuff, which is unfortunate. So, rating wise, I'll give this a light 3.5 out of 5 regardless, right? Regardless of the flaws that I mentioned, though, I still enjoyed it for what it was, right? I do appreciate the effort that was put into telling the story, taking us back into this world, and not making it feel dated, like, oh, this is something we could have gotten last decade or whatever. It feels like, all right, we just kind of had this in the back burner for years now that we just actually put this out. But I think this might be the last time you will see, a Soprano story, so to speak, though, because I hear into the grapevine that this was sort of a flop in the box office. Yeah, unfortunately, right? What I would just say, just in closing, I would say, personally, this is an HBO Max view. I wouldn't recommend watching this in theaters, because I know, with the theatrical experience that people might go in and thinking that this is going to be some kind of epic, groundbreaking, gangster film, and actually, no, it's not. It's not. It's just taking you in the early days of the world of this Sopranos thing, right? And I mean, the show itself, in my opinion, was not really trying to be like the groundbreaking series. It wasn't trying to be The Godfather or Once Upon a Time in America. It was just just a slice of life story about these despicable characters who just so happen to be living in the real world and they have families, and that's it. That's the story being told. But it's just the writing and the storytelling and just the creative decisions were just on point. That's why, people like myself rank it amongst one of the best TV shows ever made, right? But I would still recommend the series to anyone. Like, unless, this kind of material is not for you, right? But I would still say give this show a look, man. It should at least, entice you enough to see the actual series itself, right? But in terms of it being justified, I would say yes, in terms of showing, the man behind the myth, like that. But they could have shown me a little bit more of, the actual myth, the actual legend, Tony Soprano himself. I think that's what we all deserve. So it is what it is. But still, I mean, if it's your cup of tea, check it out. If not, you could skip it or, just jump into the series. I don't think you'll miss anything in particular.